What's going on, everybody? Khalipa's Tech here, coming back at you with another video. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at the Samsung Galaxy A13. Now keep in mind, this is not the A13 5G. That is a completely different phone that was released in December of 2021. The Samsung Galaxy A13, or the A13 4G as I'm going to be referring to it throughout this video, again, is a completely different phone, and this phone is the direct successor of the Samsung Galaxy A12 that came out in early 2021. This phone was actually released pretty recently in March of 2022, so in this video, I'm going to be going over everything you need to know about it to help you decide whether or not it's the right one for you. Now before we go any further, I do want to remind you to go ahead and hit that subscribe button. It helps out the channel a lot. But with all that being said, let's get started. Now with the Samsung Galaxy A13 4G, we're getting a 6.6-inch PLS LCD display. Unlike pretty much every new Samsung phone that's been coming out this year, this phone only has a standard 60Hz refresh rate, which is a little too bad because the Samsung Galaxy A13 5G, again the one that came out in December of 2021, did have a 90Hz refresh rate. So I was hoping that they'd keep it consistent, but unfortunately that's not the case with this phone. But on the bright side, we are getting a 1080p resolution, so the display is going to be nice and crisp. So if you're streaming videos, looking at photos, stuff like that, you're going to get a good experience here. With this phone, we're getting a PPI of 400, an aspect ratio of 20:9, so a pretty tall and narrow form factor. Again, great for content consumption. And then a screen to body ratio of 83.2%. So as you can see here, the bezels are a little bit thicker at the bottom and at the top, but they're really not too bad. The phone does look pretty sleek and modern for the most part. Now the overall design itself is honestly kind of boring. Looks pretty much exactly like every other phone in this price range. But then again, to be fair, that design really isn't that bad per se. And compared to something like an iPhone, the iPhones looked pretty much exactly the same for years now. So Samsung making all their lower end phones look pretty much the same isn't really anything out of the ordinary. But in general, I do like the display of this phone. Again, it's too bad that we don't get a 90Hz refresh rate, but honestly, I think having a 1080p resolution really makes up for it, because with the Samsung Galaxy A13 5G, we only got 720p. So with the A13 4G, I do think it looks a lot nicer than the A13 5G. So in general, if you're consuming a lot of content, whether you're streaming videos, playing games, looking at photos, whatever you're doing, you will get a nice experience with this phone. Now for storage, with the Samsung Galaxy A13 4G, we're getting 64GB of internal storage with microSD card expansion, pretty much the exact same thing as this phone's 5G variant, and that's not bad. But on the other hand, I have seen phones in this price range, in fact almost for this exact price, that have only 32GB of internal storage. So while 64GB isn't really the best if you're a power user, in this price range I have seen quite a bit worse. And for the average user, 64GB is really all you're going to need. If you don't have a ton of apps and photos and videos and stuff like that, you're not really going to need more than that. And even if you do have a bunch of photos and videos, you can offload that to a microSD card. So in general, I am happy with the storage on this phone. Now to give you a bit of an idea of what this kind of storage looks like when you're actually using it, I do have quite a few apps on here. I got things from more of your basic stuff like social media apps, entertainment stuff, streaming platforms, all that, and then some games too, from lower end games to higher end games, all kinds of different stuff, but really pretty much everything a normal person would use on a regular basis. And with all of that, it's taking up around 37% of my total storage, and that's including the system as well, that's taking up 13.18GB. So as you can see, the system is actually taking up the most space here, but overall I would say despite all this, I do have a pretty good amount of storage left. So really, unless you have a bunch of different apps and a bunch of photos and videos and stuff like that, which again can be offloaded to a microSD card, 64GB is probably going to be plenty of storage. Now there's no wireless charging with this phone, which is not very surprising. You don't typically find that feature very often with lower end phones, but we do have a fingerprint scanner right here on the power key. Really convenient since you're probably going to be pressing this button to wake up the display anyway. And in addition to a fingerprint scanner, we also got face unlock, so we're getting two options here to unlock the phone. But let's go ahead and give this fingerprint scanner a try and see how well it works. There we go, one more time. And there we go. So as you can see, this fingerprint scanner is real fast and responsive. No issues here. So if you do want a phone with a real nice fingerprint scanner, you won't be disappointed with the A13 4G. And I gotta say, compared to the A13 5G, for whatever reason, maybe it's just that specific phone giving me trouble, but I do think the Samsung Galaxy A13 4G has a slightly more responsive fingerprint scanner than the A13 5G. Again, that could just be me, but so far as I've been using this phone, I have noticed a little bit of a difference. Now taking a look at the camera camera setup here. On the front, we got a water drop notch, not my top choice of design, but since the bezel is so thin, it doesn't really look bad. Now this camera is 8 megapixels, not the best front-facing camera in the world, but it will get the job done. Then on the back, we got a quad camera setup, which for the level of this phone actually kind of surprised me. And with this setup, we got a 50 megapixel main camera, a 5 megapixel ultra wide camera, a 2 megapixel macro camera, and a 2 megapixel depth sensing camera. So overall, this phone, despite being a really entry-level phone, has pretty much all the features you could expect in a camera. Now of course there's no telephoto lens or anything like that, but again, this is a really entry-level phone, it's not a flagship phone. So of course with this camera, you're not going to get flagship level features or performance. But that being said, in addition to having all the features, it does take some pretty decent photos for what it is. So to give you an idea of what the camera can do, here's some photos taken with the main camera. And like I said, for what it is, these photos are actually pretty decent. The details and colors don't look bad, it's all decently bright. So I don't really have any complaints. Now of course, if you're expecting it to be somewhere along the level of something like an iPhone or an S22 Ultra, you're obviously going to be disappointed because this is nowhere near that level. But if you just want to take a few casual photos here and there, maybe to send to friends and family, or for social media, you should be completely fine. But again, if you're doing lots of mobile photography, then you might want to consider a higher end device with a slightly better camera. But again, for what it is, I do think this phone can take some pretty good photos. Now here's a couple photos taken with the ultra wide camera, same kind of thing. It's not really the best, especially around the edges, we're seeing some distortion here, but at the same time, I would still consider the ultra wide camera decently usable. Now here's a photo taken with the front-facing camera. Like I said before, not the best front-facing camera in the world, but it does work, and as you can see, it can also use portrait mode, so that's a good thing too. And in contrast, here's a photo taken with portrait mode on the rear camera. For a low-end phone, I do think it does portrait mode quite well. And I know portrait mode is pretty popular in social media stuff, so if you do want to get a few nice portrait photos here and there, the Samsung Galaxy A13 4G is going to get the job done. Now here's a photo taken with a macro camera. Probably not the most ideal subject for a photo taken with a macro camera, but you probably get the idea. The macro camera does work. Now I'm not personally a big macro camera user myself, but if you do like that feature, it is here for you to use. Now for video, the Samsung Galaxy A13 can shoot in up to 1080p in both the rear and front cameras, so no 4K or anything like that. But again, just considering the price range of this phone, that's not really that surprising. I don't expect 4K videos in an entry-level phone. Now as far as the video quality goes, I do think it's pretty decent for what it is. The video stabilization isn't really the best, but it does get the job done. But I was actually pretty impressed with the autofocus. I wasn't expecting it to be this fast on this phone, so that was a real nice surprise to see. In general, would I use this phone to take videos that I'm actually going to keep for something? Probably not. If you're trying to seriously shoot videos for something like a vlog, maybe a YouTube video, something like that, then there are definitely better options out there. But if you just want to record casual videos here and there, maybe for something like Snapchat where the quality isn't super important, then this phone will get the job done. Now internally, with the Samsung Galaxy A13 4G, we're getting 4GB of RAM with the Exynos 850 processor. Now I did run a Geekbench 5 benchmark test on this phone, and it came back with a single core score of 157, and a multi-core score of 588. Now honestly, this is so slow that I actually ran it twice just to make sure I wasn't missing something, but as you can see here, the results were pretty much the same. So this processor really isn't very strong, so if you're expecting higher performance on this phone, maybe for something like mobile gaming, or if you're just going to be on your phone a lot, you're definitely going to have some better options out there. Even in this price range, there are plenty of phones that are a lot faster. Like for example, if you have Visible, you could always go with something like the Visible Midnight. If you have Cricket, the Cricket Dream 5G is in this price range, and it's so much more powerful than this phone. The list really goes on, so if you do want a phone with more processing power that's in a general price range similar to this one, be sure to subscribe to the channel because I will be comparing this phone to lots of others in the near future, so you can get a better idea of what other options you have if you want a little bit more processing power. But in general, based on processing power alone, I wouldn't recommend this phone to anyone who's really going to be on their phone a lot, because this phone is really just going to be meant for more basic activities like sending text messages, making calls, and then some light web browsing and social media use. With anything else, it's probably going to struggle quite a bit, and if you're constantly using your phone, the performance is probably going to leave something to be desired. Now, despite having a relatively weak processor, this phone does have a really large battery with a 5000 milliamp hour battery supporting 15 watt fast charging. So if you do want a phone that's going to give you a lot of life throughout the day, the Samsung Galaxy A13 4G will be a good option. Now surprisingly, for how entry level this phone is, it also does have NFC, and in case you don't know, NFC is the technology behind contactless mobile payment services like Google Pay. So if you want to use any of those tap and pay services, you actually can with this phone. Now this may be different depending on which variant you get, because this specific phone in my hand I did get factory unlocked, and certain carriers might exclude certain features. So if NFC is important to you, definitely check and make sure before you actually get the phone, or simply just get it unlocked, because this version does have NFC. But again, that is a nice feature to have. I personally use tap and pay services all the time, so I can definitely appreciate that this phone does have that ability. But now that we've gone over some of the specs and features, let's take a closer look at the device itself. On the left side here, we got the slot for the SIM card and the micro SD card. On the bottom, we got a 3.5mm headphone jack, the microphone, a USB-C port, and the speaker. On the right side, we got the power key, which again is the fingerprint scanner, volume down, volume up. On the top, we got the noise cancelling microphone, and on the back, we got the camera setup and the flash. Now the back has a glossy finish. If you've seen my video on the A23, you're probably going to notice this phone looks almost exactly the same as that phone. Same material, cheap plastic. Not really that surprising, but I'm not a big fan of this material. It just feels so cheap and low quality. Although I will say the build itself is pretty sturdy. The buttons don't feel flimsy or anything like that, so I can't really complain too much. But overall, the general design and materials of this phone is pretty much exactly what you would expect. Just a really basic entry-level phone without a whole lot going on. Although again, I will say, despite the design being a little boring and the materials being kind of questionable, the phone does have a solid construction and it doesn't feel like it's going to fall apart. But in conclusion, my general thoughts about the Samsung Galaxy A13 4G. Overall, almost everything about this phone is at least good. It has a decent camera setup that can take pretty good photos for what it is. The display is also really nice. It's not every day we get a 1080p resolution with a phone like this, so the image is going to be real sharp and crisp, great for content consumption, and the colors and brightness look really good as well. The phone also has pretty good storage, it has NFC, and a really large battery that supports decent fast charging. So in general, really the only thing I seriously don't like about this phone is the processor. And if you're going to be on your phone a lot, or you're going to be doing higher end activities like mobile gaming, you're most likely going to find the performance of this phone pretty disappointing. So if you are a little more of a power user, then I would recommend considering a higher end phone that has a slightly better processor, because you'll probably be a little happier with a faster device. But if you're just using your phone for more basic activities, like sending text messages, making calls, some light web browsing and social media use, and then streaming a few videos here and there, then this phone is going to be a great option, and it does have some impressive features that do provide a decent amount of value. Now once again, if you do want to learn more about this phone, be sure to hit that subscribe button, because I will be comparing it to lots of other phones and making some tips and tricks videos for it in the near future. But this concludes my review of the Samsung Galaxy A13 4G, but as always, I will see you in the next one.